quick check, how many people in the room, and I'll tell you who I am in a second, are a member of an ERG, just so we can get an idea who's. How many people in the room are dealing with from a tech nonprofit maybe? Anybody from academia? What do the rest of you do? A whole lot of things. Okay. Gotcha. Oh, how many are from companies that want to start ERGs or interested in ERGs? Ah, okay, there's the missing link. Great. Well, my name is Michael DeFlorimonte. I'm happy to be here. I'm manager editor of the registeredbayarea.com. I'm also a co-founder of the African American Employee Network. I'm a huge believer in ERGs. At one time in my life, I was an engineer, worked for Applied Technology. That was an interesting experience. Eventually, I ended up becoming a VP at Charles Schwab. I ran their African American Investor Services group at Charles Schwab. I also was a member of BPACs, which is Black Professionals at Charles Schwab. I'm a huge believer in ERGs because I can definitely relate my stint at Charles Schwab with ERGs. It was BPACs at Charles Schwab that wrote a proposal to Chuck that said, hey, we need to take a look at the African American market more. We need to hire some folks to do that for us. They brought me in as a consultant. I wrote a proposal, it got funded, I got hired as a VP, and 6 or 7 years later, that was the stint. So huge believer in ERGs and their effectiveness, because I'm a direct result of that. I'm gonna go down the line here. You can meet our other panelists. They could tell us a little about you, like their name, who they work for, how long they've been in tech, how long they've been maybe involved in ERG, and what do you do within your ERG.
Awesome. I'm Jeff Gilmore. I'm a product operations manager at Facebook. I've been at Facebook for about 10 months now. Before Facebook, I had a previous career in the Air Force. While in the Air Force, I was a C-17 pilot, and also flew Learjets before that when I flew generals and congressmen around during the beginning days of the war. I'm part of the Facebook ERG. I actually run it right now, and I'm excited to be here, so thank you.
Great. My name is Beth Bacharach. I'm with LinkedIn. I've been at LinkedIn 4 years tomorrow. It's my 4-year anniversary. I am part of actually 2 ERGs. One of them is Women at LinkedIn, otherwise known as WALI, and then also the Out at In LGBT group ERG, and I am one of the co-leads of our San Francisco ERG here in San Francisco. So that's my involvement.
Hi, I'm Ayori Selassie with Salesforce, and
Can everybody hear her?
Is that on?
Is your mic on?
Oh.
No, I think it is.
It is.
Oops, sorry.
That's better, right? Okay.
There we go.
Great. Ayori Selassie. I'm the president of Boldforce, which is an ERG at Salesforce, and Boldforce. Follow us on Twitter at Boldforce, and Bold stands for Building Opportunities for Leadership and Diversity, and this ERG is specifically targeted for employees of African and African American descent, but we are a very inclusive ERG, so we welcome everyone. I'm also a senior solution engineer at Salesforce. I've been with the company for, it'll be 8 years as of October. But I've been working in and out of technology for the last 17 years now. I'm not 17. But that's me. So pleasure to meet you all. I'm so glad you guys are here to learn about this. This is great.
Nancy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nancy Torres. I am a research analyst at Google on the People Analytics team. I've been at Google, it'll be 3 years in a couple of weeks. And I am the co-chair for HOLA, which stands for Hispanic Opportunities in Leadership and Advocacy, and that's our Hispanic Googler network.
Great, thanks. Jeff, Facebook, what's working, what's not? ERGs. Tell us what's working.
Okay.
Oh yeah, it's going to be like that.
Thanks for the softie, I appreciate it. So I think it's probably best to speak to the veterans ERG initially, but a lot of these lessons can be extrapolated to the other groups as well. I would say what's working is that we've really started to build a team that's a family, that we care about each other, that part of we're acknowledging our mission, that our mission is not only to advocate to get more veterans into the company at Facebook, but once people are there, to build a supporting network and a supporting structure so that they can really thrive. So I've seen our team really start to mature and to grow towards that, and I know the other ERGs are working towards that as well. What I would say is not working yet, to be quite candid, is that there's a lot of challenges. There are still a lot of biases. I know you probably have seen Facebook release the unconscious bias program, but there still are a lot of biases. So it's always a challenge to continue to overcome that, to show that, hey, hiring a veteran is not a charity hire. It's not doing something nice or for your country, but it's something that's going to empower your company and make it even better and stronger.
Beth, LinkedIn, what's working?
What's working? Well, the fact that we now have 6 ERGs since just 4 years has really been, I think, a huge stride with our company. And just the number of people that are becoming members of the ERGs, I can really speak to women at LinkedIn, for example. We have that group in so many different offices where we have mentor rings. We follow a similar type of curriculum. So it's in a lot of events in each of those offices. So we really have people rallied around it. For Out at End specifically, finally, we have about 6 or 7 different offices where we also have Out at End groups. We're just now starting to get like a board formed. So there's still some things to do in terms of maybe not what's not working, potentially is like being able to have a global goal so that we can all then follow that global goal and cadence and then drill it down to the different types of offices that we have, because some offices is culturally different, even for women at LinkedIn or even for the Out at End group.
Google, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I would say I'll start with what's working. One thing that Ola has really started doing in the past few years is kind of expanding all of the different areas in which we seek to empower the Hispanic community through technology. So our ERG started initially internally focused, so providing mentorship to Latinos at Google, or maybe with recruiting and working with Latino organizations to bring more Latinos to Google. But in the past few years, we've expanded to working both externally and internally. So working in the education space, having coding jams with different high schools and middle schools around the country, working with Latino-owned small to medium businesses because they are Google's clients. So coming up with a comprehensive approach to diversity and advocating for the Latino community, not just in bringing them to Google, but going into communities and in attacking it from the education perspective, from the economic perspective as well. I would say one thing that we're still working on is becoming a part of the comprehensive strategy for diversity at Google and in tech. I think people have this idea that ERGs are grassroots, and they are, but they are capable of having large-scale impact in the business. And we're working on kind of partnering with teams across Google to be able to show that sustainable impact.
Okay, hold that, because we're going to do a dive on that after Ayori tells us about Salesforce.
Yeah. So I think that what's really working with ERGs is that they're beacons for what I like to call committed people. And committed people do things that are above and beyond their traditional call of duty. And they really shine a light, throughout the entire organizations. They attract other people who are incredibly passionate, and it enables organizations to do amazing things. What's not working is that ERGs are being used as a method of compliance and creating compliant organizations. And when I say compliance, I mean just meeting whatever is mandated, and that is not innovation. That is not innovative. And we are trying to push that forward to make the businesses leverage the ERGs to create commitment throughout the entire organization.
So those of us in the space know there's a lot of conversation lately around the whole concept of business resource groups. We talk about employee resource groups, and there's business resource groups, and kind of changing to that kind of approach where ERGs are really, I wouldn't go so far as to say they have bottom line responsibility, but they really look at what are they contributing to the bottom line of the business. So you begin, I think, to go there with your comment. You want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because we've actually started referring to our ERG as an EBRG, an Employee and Business Resource Group. And just to add a little more color to that, so our ERG, OLA, started actually as HGN in 2007, internally focused group. And then a few years later, there was a group of employees that were members of this ERG and started thinking about the business case for diversity and all of the different areas in our organization where Latinos at Google committed to this mission could have an impact. And a second group formed, and that was the group formed as business focused. I guess you would call it a business resource group. And then we had these two separate groups, and then just last year, we actually merged the two groups together, and now we have these three pillars that are focused on the internal efforts as well as the external efforts that touch on the business in the bottom line.
Jeff, is Facebook even approaching anything like that in terms of a business approach?
So I think as a company, we're kind of at a slightly different place, but we're moving towards that direction, like having more physical products. And so I can definitely see us moving towards that direction. There's been some talks, but I don't think we're as far along as you guys are.
Okay, so but before we get to the business case, we have to get people in the door. So Ayori, in terms of getting people in the door, what active programs does Boldforce have in place, working with HR and recruiting to make that happen at Salesforce?
Yeah, so we've been working with our employee success department for the last 3 years to help target more qualified individuals and introduce more people into the pipeline. That is, in my opinion, not the right thing that we should be doing, and we can go into that in a little bit more detail, but I would say...
you know I have to ask you, what is the right thing?
Oh, great, because that's really what I want to talk about. What's really important is...
That was like a little layup there. She's, I had to dump it on you.
See, this is why I like Michael. What's really important is moving people up the chain and bringing in leaders at the executive level and at the board level that are more diverse. Because if you look across any of the businesses that are successful in implementing sort of that diverse focused BRG, business resource group type of model, you'll notice that there's diversity at the board level, there's diversity at the executive level, and that's trickling down and ensuring that the entire business recognizes the value of diversity.
So what are you guys doing, Beth? Professional development, because after you get people in, you got to help them along, build their careers.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of programs, especially with a lot of our ERGs and just our whole global diversity inclusion group in terms of continued education within our ERG group. So we'll do workshops where we'll have speaker series for our employees, or we'll do a workshop on introverts versus extroverts, things like that to continue to keep people involved in learning for that professional development. So that's definitely with some of our ERG groups, we're starting to see more and more of that that's been driven down from the top from like some of our executive sponsors as well.
Is there a direct link between the ERGs and hiring, recruiting? Do you see that link there?
Well, yeah, I mean, talent's probably one of our top pillars. So we have talent, culture, and changing the world. We're connecting economic opportunity for everyone. But looking from a talent standpoint, I know for where I sit with Out It In, we're starting to go for university recruiting. So our talent and diversity group is trying to, and recruiting is trying to bring in some of the ERGs and especially LGBT as we go out and do university recruiting and workshops. So to let people know that there is a group at LinkedIn and there are these ERGs where people can almost be a member, but also those people are there sometimes helping to that recruit.
Now, Jeff, I know mentorship is big on your list with respect to the VET ERG group. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so a couple things that we've done that I think have been really effective is we realized that it's not just you walk through the door and all of a sudden, hey, you're now a Facebook employee, you're ready to be to adapt to a completely different culture, right? So Facebook is a very flat organization. Military is historically very hierarchical, right? So mentoring through that change is really important. We've done it both informally so far, but we've also started to put together more of a formal program. You've probably heard of Lean In Circles, and that's one thing that we're looking at expanding towards vets. Also some one-on-one mentorship through the process as well. And then another thing that's proven to be pretty popular are happy hours. just getting people together, getting people to share their experiences in a very informal environment, and building that level of trust has been really effective with our organization.
So we know that a lot of these, thank you by the way, I know that a lot of these programs aren't possible within the company unless you have a strong executive sponsorship, executive leader that's really on top of you guys and also supporting the efforts. Nancy, tell us about what that looks like at your company.
Yeah, I would say that's something that we have really focused on recently because we didn't have it for a long time.
You mean, so there was no executive that was really owning the ERG?
We had relationships with executives and leaders in different areas, but no primary executive sponsor. We actually got our first executive sponsor when we started focusing on the business. In particular, when we started working with Latino-owned small to medium businesses and working with marketing teams, traveling to different cities to have these workshops to get Latino-owned businesses online. And that was how we got our first executive sponsor. And then later got our next executive sponsor who was really passionate about career development specifically. And I think one of the key learnings that we've realize in this process is engaging executives, sponsors in one area that they're very passionate about, because at the end of the day they're very, very busy as well. And so if you can have a conversation about one specific area that the executive sponsor is passionate about, that will go a long way. And that's kind of how we've approached our engagement with executives at the company.
I can tell you that executive sponsors are really critical because at AIM, the African American Employee Network, we're often dealing with the ERG leaders. But what often happens, and you kind of have to protect against this, is that, as you know, tech is a very fluid world. You know, people are at one company one day, you know, they're another company the next, and the only notice you may give is that auto reply that says, "Oh, now I'm no longer here." you know what I'm talking about? Contact so and so, or sometimes you get the "I'm no longer here" or just disappears. So what we found is without having a firm executive sponsor in place, oftentimes, you know, the fluidity and the continuity when the ERG can die. And so we also always recommend, you know, knowing two people that you can contact within the company, because the chances of both of them leaving the same time are hopefully, you know, relatively slim. Any experience you guys have with your executive sponsorship?
Yeah, we, especially for Out at End, we have a really strong executive sponsor who's like our head of talent. But I think the next challenge that we're looking at now is getting those other people in the company, someone in legal, someone in marketing that's going to go to bat for us, or in HR that's going to be that go-to for the ERG if people have questions, if people have issues, if we need to go get funding to go participate in some type of an event. So I think it not only has the executive sponsorship, which we've been really lucky to have, but it goes down to those other groups as well that you have to, you know, with LinkedIn, one of our culture and values pieces is relationships matter. So that's really, you know, brokering that relationship in your company to find out who's going to help you along the way.
For everyone, do you find that there's communication between the executive sponsors of the various groups, or are they kind of working in silos?
Yeah. I mean, I can only speak for mine, but my executive sponsor is on Mark's what's called the M team, his leadership team. So
that would be Zuckerberg?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Right. And so even today, like I met with him for 15, 20 minutes to chat with him to talk about it. And so he's really engaged, he cares. And I think just knowing that you have someone at that level who cares really makes our team more effective and motivated to spend, sometimes we just have limited bandwidth to do it, but we use that extra time to like help build our ERG and make it stronger.
Others?
Yeah, I would just add, so when our second executive sponsor, when we first had the conversation with him about supporting Ola, he actually reached out to executive sponsors of other ERGs at the company and asked what their role was. The interesting thing is, depending on, all the ERGs are very different as far as how they operate, how the leadership structure, who are the executive sponsors, how do they get the resources for events or programs. So it does vary, but that was something that just helps communication across ERGs as well, to share those best practices.
So you got to have an executive sponsor, somebody's waving the flag for you at the senior level, and somebody you can work with to leverage to get things done. But let's talk about brass tacks, funding. Salesforce. It takes money. How do because you know how the ERG goes. If you don't have money, there's certain things you can't make happen. So how is the ERG at Salesforce funded, and what does that process look like?
Yeah, so it's not the best in the world, but it's definitely tied to the relationships that you have with the executives. And so those executive sponsors are really central to being able to bring in that additional funding. And I just one note I want to make about executive sponsorship is that there is a tendency that executive sponsors who sponsored an ERG at one company, they will seek out an ERG to sponsor the next company that they go to. So this is sort of something that these folks have learned how to do. They've learned how to engage with ERGs, motivate them and support them, because it is so much work that oftentimes the group itself doesn't have necessarily the inertia to turn over a new executive sponsor and get them to learn everything that's needed for them to be a great executive sponsor for this type of cause. And I do think that some of that messaging around the value of business resource groups would help to reduce the friction in turning over new executive sponsors for ERGs.
Okay, I'm going to forget this, but I want one of you guys to remind me. I want to ask a question about qualities one should look for an executive sponsor, because the people out there that are trying to form an ERG are thinking, okay, who do we go to? But before, I want to hear about funding of ERGs at LinkedIn and how that process works.
Yeah, I can't speak to all of the funding because I think it's a little bit different, but I know where I've had to specifically go out and try to get funding to be in a conference, so to speak. You have to kind of think of your angles, and I've ended up going down the recruiting angle because that's going to help us from a recruiting standpoint. And it usually comes from different business units. I don't think we have a formalized, at least in the ERG I'm in, a formalized process, and that's something that we're really working on for 2016 in our group.
So I have to say, we're pretty fortunate at Facebook. If we have an idea that is going to move metrics or make our group stronger, and we can prove it and back it up, we so far have gotten that funding. That's not to say it's easy and it doesn't take a lot of work, but we're able to do it, and I think that's a great sign of my company supporting our resource group. And I know that's across the board with the other resource groups as well.
So is it, for everyone, is it project by project, or do you get a pot of gold at the beginning of the year that you get to budget out?
It really depends.
Yeah, I'd say it depends. And for us, both. As far as, I just want to make one point on the project by project and getting fundings for things, is finding opportunities to align with different teams and the business and utilize funding from those teams. So one example something we did is working with, we have a team at Google, CS First, a team that works to build these computer science clubs across different schools in the US. And so we partnered with them to start these CS First clubs in communities that are majority Latino. And through that was a way that we were able to get budget for a project that we were passionate about, but that also served the goals of the team. And so we look for those opportunities of alignment.
For our timer in the audience, this clock says 14 minutes left. My phone says 10 minutes, and what does your sign say? 8 minutes. Oh, wow. Can't you kind of give me the middle, kind of 12? I said we got 8 minutes. Okay, that's okay. That's fine. I can work with 8 minutes.
Skip to the tough questions.
No. I think we've covered a lot. There's a section we haven't gotten to, but I really want to see if the audience has some specific questions that we want right here that we want to address.
Hi. Hello. I have a quick question about smaller organizations and if there are parallels to ERGs or how you see ERGs being translated into smaller companies than Facebook or Google.
Anybody?
Yeah, I would say, even though Google's the larger company, that really, our ERGs started with specific relationships between employees that were seeking a network, and support. And I think that that's how ERGs start to form, and that's how they sustain themselves as well, through the relationships within that network. So I think small organizations are actually in a really, really good place to build a strong foundation for an employee resource group.
Anybody else want to?
Yeah, I would add, I don't think the size actually matters. You can be an ERG of one, and it really what matters is how you're representing your company and what kind of energy and people and resources you're attracting to your company, and ultimately being able to translate that into more value for the business.
Okay, I'm gonna hit another question right here.
Hi, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate your everything that you've shared. I have been working with the HR at my company to make it a more inclusive and diverse workforce for hiring all the way up to retention. And one of the questions that I've gotten is, what can the C-level executives do specifically, since they are extremely busy all the time, what can they personally do to be involved in the effort of making my company more diverse and inclusive? And I was wondering if you have input on that.
Anybody?
Yeah.
I can take that, or go ahead.
Well, I just think that the leaders in the company are really what other people are going to mirror themselves after. And so your leaders are having all hands meetings. I think every time they're addressing the entire company, they should always be speaking about the value of diversity and challenging their employees around how are you going to move forward, and sharing their own personal stories of that as well. I think that's incredibly valuable to the business and sorely overlooked.
Yeah, great point. The other thing I wanted to add is that companies put their money where their mouth is and what's important to them. And so having a sponsor, a C-level sponsor, or someone on that leadership team attend at least one of the events once a year, right? That shows that they care. And if you can't carve out 30 minutes in a year, you probably don't care about it. But then along with that, once beyond that, getting the support and banging the drum repeatedly to make that happen is really important. And that's part of the way that we feel cared for within our organization.
I'm going to agree with that. Especially all hands meetings, we have them every 2 weeks, and globally, and it's usually a topic: diversity, inclusion, what we're doing, and just helping everyone have that really good culture and feeling together. And no matter who you are, how you identify, anything like that, we're all together as one. And I think that has a lot to do with leaders and the senior leaders really stepping up in the C-level to lead the team.
Question right here.
Hi, I'm wondering if I've been at an organization that's roughly 30 years old and has never had an ERG company, ERG group, should I worry that there's a stigma to trying to start one? If you guys had to start your ERG groups from scratch, are there kind of pitfalls and ways to position it that you think would make it more effective and inclusive so that there's no stigma to creating one or joining one?
I think you just have to really think of it like a startup. And the same way that you would if you were trying to build some new technology, how you would have to obviously clearly state the problem that you're solving, helping make sure that people understand what the problem is, and then presenting your ERG as a solution to that problem. And it's really important to make sure that people can see themselves as a part of the solution rather than as a part of the problem. And sometimes when we talk about diversity, there's a lot of guilt associated with that conversation. So giving people the immediate out and then the immediate in on the solution really helps.
I'd say another thing is start small. You don't need to call yourself an ERG from day one. Maybe it's a lunch that starts with a topic that's centered around career development or something like that, and then connect with the people that are the most engaged and go from there.
A lot of people in tech.
Go ahead. No.
A lot of people in tech don't like the word structure as well, and so So if you say that you're going to create this huge structure with like you need to fill a vice president and a secretary and a treasurer, that feels really heavy. So just like you both were saying, to like start off small and do things that necessarily don't scale, and see how it works. And if it doesn't work, like go back to the drawing board and try it again, and keep trying until you finally get to that point where you have the organization that you want. But don't give up.
Yeah. And I want to just add one other thing too, is that sometimes when we think about starting an ERG, we think it's all internal. And I think the best way to actually just start one out is to actually be bringing people external in to the fold, and either having speaker engagements or just inviting people in to come and have a chat.
Thank you.
Question.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So I work for an organization that's been around for quite some time, about 70 years, and so I noticed a couple years ago, I have a mentor that would take a few of us under the belt that were young professionals, and so he left, but after he left, I realized that we needed more cultivation in the organization because the average age is not me at the organization. And so I realized that I created an ERG for young professionals development. And so I reached out and I received a sponsor on our leadership team, and he meets with us about once a month. And so we do have a brown bag lunch. And so I've been thinking of ways how to scale. Another company actually reached out to me, a tech company that wants their particular Black ERG group to work with us, as they feel like it's a way to benefit themselves as having something fun to do. And so I'm just trying to think of ways, of ideas of how to, just have more buy-in from the organization, because this is a unique group that we have, as a unique type of ERG as young professionals. And so what are just some ideas and tips you may have for a very young ERG group?
Ideas, tips, secret sauce. Anybody got some secret sauce?
Yeah, beer always works. But I think doing activities that are for that group is like one of the first steps. Like you probably do something that you want to do anyways naturally is a great way to bring people together, just as you would bring friends together, of doing things that would be fun on a weekend.
And another piece too is maybe having something where people can go give back. Maybe it's once a quarter where it's some type of nonprofit and volunteering. That always gets us when we have, we do these random acts of kindness every once in a while, and everyone wants to get involved, because especially younger people, millennials, they want to feel like they're getting involved and they're giving back more so than anything like that. So that should be something that would help.
Yeah, ditto on that one. Absolutely. Philanthropy piece is huge.
Yeah, I would also say, I don't think people focus on this all the time, but managers as well. If a manager is supportive of someone's involvement, that goes a long way, because at the end of the day, people are involved in ERGs on top of their core roles. So sometimes I think there's this notion that people are not doing parts of their core role because they're involved in an ERG, and that's often not the case. They're often going above and beyond. So involving managers as well is a really good way to spread support and buy-in, I think.
I think overall too, time, we're okay-ish, 2-3 minutes left. I think you want to kind of think of adding value, just like anything else. You said it's like a startup, I think if you look at the people that you want to attract to your ERG, how are you adding value to the company, and not necessarily in the order, and to the individual, right? How are you adding value with this career development, whether it's retention, whether it's mentorship, how are you truly adding value, So you have to answer the question for them, kind of like, what's in it for me? And if you can answer that question, both in terms of programs and career development, I think then you'll have some of the glue that it takes to move some of these ERGs down the road. Because some of these are really successful and have all kinds of buy-in, and it could be a smaller company with let's say 50 people in the ERG, but they get 80% participation whenever the ERG does something. So I think it's a lot that has to do with adding value. I think we have time for maybe one more. Do we have one more question out here at all? Are we good?
I'll just provide a quick resource. I have no personal relationship with Catalyst, but for those of you that are looking for resources, if you want to start employee resource groups, they have step-by-step process of how to start, what to do, how to get the groundswell, how to get the executive sponsor on board, things like that. So I lead diversity and inclusion at Adobe, and we had a really active women's group, and over the past year we've stood up 3 more employee resource groups, so I've found a lot of value in that. And they also have, this year they had their first annual conference. It was in Toronto, so believe it or not, it was an entire conference like this all day, just totally focused on employee resource groups. So lots of resources out there if you want to start them up.
Great. I think we've got to wrap it up. I'm giving this big dismiss sign over here. Sorry, Linda. I want to thank all of our panelists. I think it's been really great. Kept your answers concise to the point, but very, very good content here. So I want to thank you very much. And thank you, audience, for tolerating us up here for the last 40 minutes.